Bedtime stories for adults. If, like me, some of your fondest memories are of being tucked in and hearing a favorite story as you drifted off to sleep, you'll love this channel. Here, you'll find gentle bedtime readings of my own books, narrated by my assistant May, in a soft, soothing voice designed to help you relax. No jarring sound effects, no sudden noises, just calm, feel good stories to ease you into sleep. If you enjoy these stories and would like to support the channel, you can also find all of my books available on Amazon. Chapter 1. Harry sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the same chipped mug he'd been drinking coffee from for 20 years. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have in the quiet of the small house, each second marking another reminder that nothing new was coming. He had raised his kids, seen them grow and leave, and endured the kind of marriage that was more survival than love. 17 years of it, until the papers were signed and his life narrowed down to silence. Most days, he tinkered in the garage with half-finished model airplanes, radios he never quite repaired, and tools that stayed where they were left. Hobbies, he told himself. Distractions. Ways to keep the hours busy until sleep came. But tonight, something was different. It started with the sound. Not the creak of the old house or the hum of the fridge, but a low vibration in the walls, subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice. Harry noticed. He always noticed things. The air felt thicker, charged, as though a storm were building overhead, though the weather reports had promised a clear night. Harry rubbed his forehead, muttering to himself, "Great, now I'm hearing things." Still, he couldn't shake it. A pulse. A presence. Something just beyond the edge of his awareness, waiting. Harry stood up, uneasy, and pressed his hand against the wall. The vibration was real, like the purr of an engine deep underground. He pulled his hand away quickly, suddenly aware of how quiet the rest of the house was. Even the fridge had gone still, its usual hum snuffed out. The hairs on his arms rose. A pale light flickered through the window above the sink. Not the bluish glow of a neighbor's TV or the yellow wash of a street lamp, but something, purer, whiter. It pulsed in rhythm with the vibration, as though both were tied to the same hidden heartbeat. Against his better judgment, Harry shuffled to the back door and stepped outside. The night air was sharp, cool against his face. The sky was clear, stars brilliant, moon bright, but there, in the middle of his yard, hovered a sphere of light the size of a basketball. It wasn't touching the ground. It wasn't tethered to anything. It just floated there, humming softly, every pulse of its glow matched by that vibration in Harry's chest. His throat went dry. "Okay," he muttered. "I've really lost it this time." The sphere drifted closer. Harry should have run. He knew he should have, but his legs wouldn't obey. The light wasn't harsh. It was warm, oddly inviting, like a campfire in winter. When it was only an arm's length away, it stopped, suspended in the air. The vibration intensified, no longer in the walls but in his head. Memories spilled forward, his ex-wife's voice during their worst fights, his kids laughing as toddlers, the sting of being alone. Then, behind those memories, another voice pressed in. Deeper. Older. Not words exactly, but a resonance that cut through his bones. "We have always been with you." Harry staggered, gripping his knees. The light surged, wrapping around him, sinking beneath his skin. He gasped as the pulse became his pulse, as though his heart had been hijacked. For one brief, terrifying second, he wasn't Harry anymore. And then, darkness. When he woke, he was lying on the grass. The sphere was gone. The yard was empty. The night was silent again, except for the distant sound of a dog barking 2 streets over. Harry sat up, chest heaving. His hands shook as he pressed them to his face. But in the back of his mind, the voice lingered. "We are not finished." Chapter 2. Harry Buxton woke with a start, his body stiff from having fallen asleep on the couch again. Sunlight pushed through the curtains, far too bright for his aching eyes. His head throbbed, not from drink. He'd given that up years ago, but from something heavier, stranger. For a moment he wondered if the glowing sphere had only been a dream, some wild trick of an overworked mind. But the grass stains on his jeans told him otherwise. He shuffled into the kitchen, put on a pot of coffee, and leaned against the counter. His mind spun in the same worn circles it always had, circles he'd lived with for decades without fully understanding. It hadn't been until later in life, long after raising 3 kids and working 2 careers, that he learned what had truly shadowed him all along. bipolar depression, dyslexia, and a dozen labels that made sense of the years people had dismissed as laziness. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Laziness. That word had followed him like a curse. And yet, somehow, he had built a life anyway. He had engineered computer systems in his 20s, switched tracks completely to tattooing in his 30s, and chased hobbies that shifted week by week, woodworking 1 month, painting the next, then radios, then model planes. A restless hunger, never satisfied. The coffee pot hissed. Harry poured himself a mug, staring into the steam. He tried to shake off the memory of the light, the voice, the way it had wrapped itself inside his chest. But it clung to him, heavy and insistent. "We have always been with you." The words echoed, low and steady, as if they had been carved into the back of his skull. Harry set the mug down harder than he meant to, sloshing coffee onto the counter. He wiped it absently with his sleeve, then pressed both palms flat against the cool surface. "Get a grip, Buxton," he muttered. "You've handled worse." But deep down, he knew this wasn't another mood swing, or one of his frantic hobby obsessions come and gone. This was different. This was real. And if last night had been the beginning, then something was coming for him. Something that wouldn't let him disappear quietly into his little routines. Harry carried his coffee into the living room and sank into the old recliner, the springs groaning beneath his weight. His phone sat on the side table, screen dark, but just seeing it reminded him of the people who weren't here. His kids. Kayla, his youngest, still called every week. She had a warmth that cut through his rough edges, a kind of patience he never thought he deserved. Talking with her was like stepping into a brighter world for a while, one where he wasn't broken or failing, just Dad. Scott, his son, was more of a peer than anything else. They could talk shop for hours, swapping stories about computer systems and solving logic puzzles together. Sometimes Harry forgot who was mentoring who. Scott's mind had outpaced his years ago. Still, the bond was there. Quiet, steady, a friendship as much as family. And then there was Robin. The middle child. The one who had cut him out completely. Harry never understood where it went wrong. Whether it was something he had done, or something he had failed to do. The silence between them was the loudest noise in his life, a wound that never healed. Every time he thought of her, guilt rose like acid in his throat. Harry sighed, setting the mug down on the armrest. He rubbed his temples, trying to push the thoughts away when it happened again. The vibration. This time it didn't come from the walls. It came from the ceiling. A deep hum rolled overhead, rattling the light fixture until the bulb flickered. Harry froze, eyes fixed on the plaster above him. The room dimmed, as though the sun outside had been swallowed. Then, through the thin curtains, a glow. Pale. Familiar. "No," Harry whispered, his chest tightened. "Not again." He forced himself to his feet and staggered to the window. Outside, hovering just above the street, was another sphere of light, larger than the first. Its surface rippled like liquid glass, pulsing in that same impossible rhythm. And this time, there were shapes inside, shadows moving within the glow, elongated, indistinct, but human enough to send a chill down Harry's spine. The hum grew louder, pressing against his skull. Memories surged again, but not just his own. Images of ancient stone, deserts under alien skies, towers of impossible geometry. Harry stumbled back, clutching the curtain for balance. We are not finished. The light flared once, brilliant, and then vanished, leaving only the ordinary street, a barking dog, and Harry's own ragged breathing. He collapsed into the recliner, heart hammering. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. For a moment, he thought of calling Kayla, just to hear her voice, to remind himself that he was still tethered to something real. But what could he say? That glowing spheres were stalking him? That he might be losing his mind? Instead, he sat in silence, the phone heavy in his hand, the words of the voice echoing again and again. We are not finished. Harry's thumb hovered over Kayla's name on the screen. For a long moment he just sat there, staring at it, torn between the weight of pride and the desperate need for comfort. Finally he tapped. The ringtone buzzed in his ear. Once. Twice. Then. Dad? Her voice was bright, warm, the same tone she'd used since she was little, as though nothing could truly darken it. Everything okay? Harry swallowed, trying to steady his breath. Yeah, kiddo, I just wanted to hear your voice. There was a pause, soft but loaded. She knew him too well. What's going on? He closed his eyes. He couldn't tell her about the spheres, the voices, the way his mind felt hijacked. Not yet. Just one of those nights. Thought I'd check in. Her tone gentled, a mixture of love and quiet concern. You're not alone, you know. Even if you feel that way sometimes. Harry's chest tightened. I know. They talked for a few more minutes, about her job, her dog, the little things that made up her day. And as she spoke, Harry felt anchored again, the madness of the light receding just enough for him to breathe. When they finally hung up, he sat for a while in silence, holding on to the echo of her voice. But when he set the phone down, the house seemed different. The walls hummed faintly, as though carrying an aftershock of what had happened. His coffee had gone cold. He leaned back in the recliner, staring at the ceiling. What the hell do you want from me? He muttered aloud. The silence answered, but deep in that silence Harry felt it. A pressure, watching, waiting. We are not finished. Harry shivered. For the first time in years, his restless hobbies, his tinkering distractions, his fragile routines, none of it could protect him from what had begun. And somewhere in the back of his mind a thought rose unbidden, chilling him more than the voice itself. What if this had been with him all along? Chapter 3. Harry's thoughts wandered as he worked on the 17th century sailing ship he had been puttering with for years. The wooden model sprawled across his workbench, its hull half-painted, masts bare, sails still folded neatly in the box. He sanded the edge of a plank with care, watching the dust gather in pale curls, the smell of wood and glue mixing into something familiar. This ship had been his longest project. Other hobbies had come and gone, paintings abandoned, guitars collecting dust, unfinished radios piled on shelves, but the ship always pulled him back. It was steady, patient, waiting for him the way no person ever had. As his hands moved, his mind drifted. He thought of the sea, of storms battering real decks centuries ago, of men clinging to ropes as waves crashed around them. He imagined the creak of timbers, the slap of sails, the endless horizon. It was a place he had never known, but one that felt oddly close, as though buried in his bones. The rasp of the sandpaper slowed. Harry blinked, realizing his thoughts had slipped again, not into fantasy, but into something stranger. The ship on the workbench blurred, its tiny planks replaced by massive timbers, its miniature deck swelling beneath his feet. For a heartbeat, he wasn't in the garage at all. He was there, standing aboard a full-sized vessel cutting through black waters under a starless sky. He gripped the bench, gasping, and the vision snapped. He was back in his cluttered garage, the model ship steady under the fluorescent light. His hands shook. No, he whispered. Not while I'm awake. But the hum answered him. Faint at first, then stronger. It rattled a jar of nails on the shelf, sent a screwdriver rolling across the bench. The ship's tiny mast quivered. Harry backed away, chest tight. Not here, he said aloud, voice breaking. Not here. The air thickened, heavy with that same impossible presence, and in his head the voice rose again, patient and unyielding. We have always been with you. Harry staggered back against the workbench, his breath ragged. The hum grew louder, filling the garage until it drowned out the sound of his own heartbeat. The model ship seemed to swell in his vision again, its hull expanding, its deck stretching wider and wider. He squeezed his eyes shut. It's not real, he told himself. It's not. But when he opened them, the garage was gone. He stood on the rolling deck of the ship. Salt spray stung his face, though there was no sea he could see. The horizon was a black void, stars scattered above but no moon, no land, nothing but endless dark water and the groan of the timbers beneath his feet. Harry clutched the rail, knuckles white. His stomach lurched with the motion of the waves, yet no wind touched the sails. The ship moved, but by what force, he couldn't tell. Figures stirred on the deck. Shadows first, elongated, vague, and then they sharpened. Tall, lean, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Not human, not entirely. Their features shifted, unreadable, as though carved from stone and smoke at the same time. Harry's throat closed. He tried to speak, to demand an answer, but no sound came. One of the figures stepped closer. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as though time itself bent around it. When it stopped before him, Harry felt the weight of centuries pressed down on his shoulders. The figure raised a hand, long fingers curling toward his chest. The hum became a roar. His ribs vibrated as if his bones were tuning forks, his heart slamming in rhythm with a force outside himself. The figure's hand touched him, not with skin, but with light sinking through his chest. Harry convulsed. His vision split. He saw himself as a boy, sitting in a classroom where teachers scolded him for laziness. He saw himself as a young man, fumbling with machines, hiding the shame of mistakes he couldn't explain. He saw his children's faces, Kayla's patience, Scott's sharp eyes, Robin's distance like a locked door, and through it all, the voice thundered. We have always been with you. You are the vessel. Harry dropped to his knees. The deck shifted beneath him, the ship tilting, waves crashing now in earnest. The figures closed in, their outlines blurring, multiplying until the entire deck swarmed with them. He could feel them in his blood, crawling under his skin, threading through his nerves like fire. He screamed. The sound ripped raw from his chest, echoing across the dark ocean. Then, silence. He was back in the garage. On the floor. The model ship shattered beside him, pieces scattered across the concrete like debris after a storm. His hands trembled as he clutched at his chest, lungs burning. The hum had stopped, but the words remained, etched deep where no tool could carve them. You are the vessel. Chapter 4. Harry woke on the garage floor to the ache of an old body that had been thrown down by something he still didn't understand. He rolled onto an elbow, wincing as grit pressed into his skin. The model ship lay in wreckage beside him, splintered spars, a snapped bowsprit, rigging like spider webs torn from a corner. He touched the largest fragment, smoothing a thumb over the curved hull where hours of careful sanding had once lived. He didn't feel grief for the ship, not exactly. What he felt was a hollow certainty, like a lock finally clicking into place. It made a kind of sense. He didn't know why that thought came. He didn't want it to. But it landed and stayed, like a coin thrown onto wet clay. You are the vessel. He squeezed his eyes shut until colors swam. His pulse thudded in his ears, answering a rhythm that felt older than the house, older than his bones. He dragged himself up to sitting and leaned against the bench. Dust drifted through the single shaft of afternoon light, turning the air into a slow-moving river of gold. Somewhere, a neighbor's mower started, the normalcy of it nearly comic. The normal world goes on, he thought, even when yours splits. He gathered the ship's broken pieces into a cardboard lid, the kind screws came in, and set them gently aside. His hands steadied as they worked. When he finished, he stayed still, listening. No hum, no presence, only his breath, ragged at first, then leveling. He stood, knees popping, and clicked off the fluorescent light. The garage dimmed. In the hallway mirror, he caught a ghost of himself, hair thinned and wild, cheeks hollowed by years that had not asked permission. He looked away. In the kitchen, he poured water and drank it all in one go. The glass clicked against the counter when he set it down, the sound louder than it should have been. He pressed his palms flat, as if bracing for a tremor that didn't come. It makes sense, he said aloud, testing the words like a man tasting something he wasn't sure was food. It makes sense. Because there was a gap in his life that nothing had ever filled, no matter how hard he tried. Not the marriage. Not the kids, as much as he loved them. Not the shops where he worked, the servers he built, the skin he inked, the phones he answered, the repairs he botched and then learned to fix. Not the hobbies, the rotations of obsessions that kept the calendar turning. The gap was older than all of it. He turned toward the short hallway and the door at the end that stuck a little in summer. The attic hatch waited above the washing machine, a rectangle of paint with a loop of string like a white tear. He stared at it a long time before he moved. The ladder creaked under his weight. Warm air breathed down like dry and tinged with insulation. He poked his head into the dusk of the attic and waited for his eyes to adjust. The smell was familiar. Dust, old wood, forgotten cloth. The small window at the gable laid a silver bar across a row of boxes, the light like a finger pointing. He crawled toward the familiar shapes. Dad's tools. Christmas. Kayla, grade school. A crushed wreath. A stack of flat taped envelopes with his first wife's looping script. Then a box he had labeled in block letters long ago. Mom and Dad, papers. He pulled it forward and sat cross-legged in the dust. The cardboard rasped under his palms as he pried the top open. Paper smell, sweet and stale. Inside, tax folders, a yellow deed, greeting cards rubber-banded into bundles, an envelope with "For Harry" written in his mother's careful hand. His chest tightened. He hadn't opened this box since the funeral. When grief had turned him into a functional ghost who could sign forms and find a clean shirt but not be trusted with anything fragile. He rested his fingers on the envelope. For Harry. The ink had faded to brown. He slid a nail under the flap and peeled it slowly. A letter dated 20 years ago. The paper trembled in his hands as he unfolded it. Harry, if you're reading this, your father and I are gone, or that day is near. There are things we wished we could have said better. We wanted you to know from the beginning that we chose you. We chose you because the first time we saw you, you looked at us like you recognized us. We never forgot that. You asked us about your birth parents when you were young, and again when you were a man. We know the look that crossed your face when we told you to wait. It pained us every time. We did not say wait to keep you from truth. We said wait because we were afraid. Afraid of what it would open in you. Afraid of what it would take from us, selfishly. The agency gave us almost nothing. A county caseworker. A date. No names. We tried once to learn more. We were told the records were sealed and lost. We are sorry. We are so proud of the man you became. If you choose to look with the knowledge that you were loved every day you were ours, Mom. He read it twice. The attic pressed in, the tight slope of the roof. The quiet blanket of dust that no one had disturbed but mice and time. He thought of his mother in her chair, the way she would fold a towel slower than necessary when a hard topic came up, as if neat edges could keep rough facts from fraying. He thought of his father's jaw tightening, words landing like small stones. Wait until we're gone. He had honored that. And then he had never looked at all. Because what if there was nothing to find? Because what if there was too much? He set the letter aside and dug deeper. Adoption certificate. Name struck through, replaced with sealed. A photocopied hospital form with a date and a smudged weight. A blurred stamp. 3 pages of black rectangles where lines should have been. Censorship like a winter field after burn. At the very bottom, under a brittle manila folder whose tab had torn off, his fingers found something not paper. A small cloth pouch, the drawstring tied in a double knot, stained darker where oil had bled through. He frowned and loosened it. A pendant slid into his palm. It was no larger than a quarter, heavier than it looked, made of some dull metal that wasn't brass or steel. A spiral had been etched into its face by a hand that did not care about symmetry. The line thickened and thinned as it coiled inward to a point. Around the edge, faint marks like short bars, regular, meticulous. He held it to the slant of light. The marks weren't scratches. They were deliberate, tiny, repeated notches that circled the pendant like a clock with too many hours. His fingertips buzzed. He closed his fist, and the feeling stopped. He opened it again, and the feeling returned, soft, like the brush of moth wings. He lifted the pendant until it touched the hollow at the base of his throat. The attic hummed. Not loud, barely there. A memory of a sound. But it ran through the boards and rafters like a wire threaded at birth. The pendant warmed, just enough to be felt. Harry jerked it away, breath quickening. The hum faded. He stared at the small circle of metal, the hand-cut spiral, the too many hours. "What are you?" he whispered. No answer. Only that unhelpful silence that life used when it wanted him to make a choice. He dropped the pendant back into the pouch and tied the strings tight. He slipped the pouch into his shirt pocket, where it lay against his chest, like a polite knock that refused to stop. On the way down the ladder, he missed a rung and cursed, the old familiar rhythm of his voice anchoring him to gravity. In the laundry room, he stood with his hands on his hips, letting the cool of the tile rise through his socks. He looked toward the phone on the kitchen counter. Scott could help. Scott knew his way around records and systems, the dark alleys of data where the living and the dead sometimes met. Scott could run searches that went around locked doors. And telling Kayla would be like opening a window. She'd bring air. She always did. Robin crossed his mind and left a bruise. He pressed that thought aside gently, like a photograph he couldn't put in the album yet. He walked to the sink and turned on the tap. Water rushed, glittering. He splashed his face, then gripped the counter until his knuckles blanched. In the stainless steel mirror of the kettle, he saw his mouth set in a line that used to be his father's. "60s scoop," he thought, letting the words rise and sit. The term had been a rumor that stuck to the roof of his life, a possible map he never dared unfold. Born late in the 60s, adopted out with the stamp of a government that kept messes under file folders. No names, no trails, nothing to follow but a feeling. If that was who he was, if some piece of him had been cut from a people he never knew, maybe the blank pages weren't a mistake. Maybe they were a design. He didn't know if that made it better or worse. He dried his face and picked up the phone. His thumb hovered over Scott's name, then slid away. Not yet. He needed one more hour in his own head, one more hour to decide whether what he had found in the attic was a clue or a trap. He set the phone down and, after a moment, dug in the junk drawer for an old magnifier. At the table, he poured the pendant into his palm again and brought the lens close. The notches around the edge weren't random. They repeated in groups, a pattern of long, short, short, long, short, 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 and variations that repeated like a song you only recognized once it reached the chorus. He counted unconsciously, tapping the table with the nail of his index finger. The rhythm he fell into matched something he'd heard before, the pulse in the walls, in the night air, in his bones. He swallowed. Okay. The hum answered, faint as a breath on the back of his neck. He laid the pendant flat and touched the spiral's center with the tip of the magnifier's handle. The metal ticked, so small a sound he almost thought he imagined it. Then the spiral darkened, not in color but in weight, like the line sunk deeper into the disc. Harry's vision narrowed. The kitchen blurred. The pendant grew. For a heartbeat he saw the spiral not as a line but as a path carved into stone, a stair he was supposed to follow down. We have always been with you. He jerked back, chair legs scraping. The room snapped into focus. The pendant sat where he'd left it, innocent as a napkin ring. He gathered the disc into the pouch and knotted it twice. He slipped it back into his pocket and stood, the decision arriving in him bare and simple. He would look. He would look because he should have looked years ago. He would look because the blank was no longer safe, and because if the voice wanted him to be a vessel, then he needed a map before he agreed, or refused. He picked up the phone again. This time, he tapped Scott's name. "Hey, Dad," Scott said on the second ring, voice brisk with a kind of careful warmth. "Everything okay?" Harry looked at the window, at the square of sky cut clean by the frame. "Got a weird question for you," he said. "Do you still have access to those archive tools you were playing with? The ones that find old stuff, older than it should still be online?" A pause. "Some," Scott said. "Depends what you're looking for." Harry's tongue felt heavy. He pushed the words out anyway. "Me," he said. "I'm looking for me." Another pause, softer. "Okay," Scott said. "Tell me what you have." Harry slid the letter from his pocket and stared at his mother's looping hand. He touched the pouch with his other hand, feeling the small, unignorable weight. "A date," he said. "A hospital. And maybe a thing that belonged to someone who knew before I did." "Send me pictures," Scott said, voice already shifting into the gear that solved problems. "We'll start there." After they hung up, Harry stood in the center of his kitchen and listened. The silence felt different now, not empty, but expectant. He pulled out his phone, snapped photos of the letter, the forms, the pendant, the pouch. He sent them. His hands were steady. On the counter, the magnifier lay where he'd left it, the lens catching a small circle of light and throwing it onto the table. The circle quivered, then steadied, then pulsed once, twice, 3 times, so faint a change he could have blamed the clouds. He didn't. "I'm looking," he told the empty room. "With or without you, I'm looking." The reply was not a word. It was a feeling, warm as a hand on his shoulder and cold as a door opening in winter. We are not finished. Chapter 5. Harry didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, phone face down, the pendant pouch heavy in his shirt pocket. Every creak of the house sounded sharper, every car passing down the street like an intruder's footsteps. Scott had promised to run a search. "Give me a day," he'd said. "Some of these archives don't talk to each other. You've got to trick them into opening." Harry had heard that tone before, the calm focus that meant Scott was already halfway down a rabbit hole. So Harry waited. He drank coffee he didn't need, stared at the cracks in the ceiling paint, and fought the urge to dump the pendant in the trash. But every time he thought about it, he remembered the hum in his bones when he touched it, The way the spiral deepened like a path into somewhere not meant for eyes. Throwing it away felt like throwing away a piece of himself. Near dawn, his phone buzzed. Not Scott. Kayla. He hesitated, then answered. Hey, kiddo. You sound like you've been up all night, she said, voice thick with sleep. Harry chuckled softly. Caught me. Dad, there was that pause again, the one that said she knew more than he told her. You're okay, right? Harry rubbed his eyes. Define okay. She sighed. Okay, as in not alone and unraveling. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to give her that comfort. Instead, he said, I'm working on something. Something. About me. About before you knew me. The silence stretched. Then, carefully, Kayla asked, Your adoption? Harry's throat tightened. Yeah, her voice softened. Dad, you never wanted to go there. Maybe it's time. He fingered the pouch in his pocket, the spiral pressing faintly against his chest through the cloth. Maybe it's way past time. Before she could answer, the hum returned. Not in the walls, not in his chest, this time in the phone itself. The faintest vibration under his ear, as if a second caller had joined the line. Silent, but listening. Harry froze. Kayla, you still there? Yeah, she said, confused. Why? Did the line cut? Harry's hand shook. No, it's fine. But the truth was clear. Whatever had found him wasn't confined to his visions anymore. It had followed him into the call. Promise me you'll rest, Kayla said gently. You sound... different. Different. The word hung in the air after they hung up. He set the phone down gently, staring at it as though it might buzz again on its own. Minutes crawled. Then, as dawn pushed light through the blinds, the phone lit up. Scott this time. Harry answered before the second ring. Please tell me you found something. Scott exhaled, the sound sharp and focused, like he was sitting in front of 3 monitors at once. Depends on what you mean by something. I found records that shouldn't exist, and I found gaps that looked deliberate. Someone erased parts of your file, Dad. Not sloppily, surgically. Harry's stomach dropped. Erased? Yeah. Whole blocks of data replaced with timestamps that don't match the era. The adoption record's been rewritten more than once, and not by amateurs. Harry pressed a hand to his temple. The pendant in his pocket seemed to pulse, heavier than its size should allow. There's more, Scott continued. One of the documents links to an old federal case file, but it's not open access. It's flagged as cultural preservation. That usually means indigenous heritage. But the weird thing is, it's cross-referenced with something I've never seen before, an astronomical registry code. Astronomical? Harry whispered. Yeah, Scott said. Like space. Coordinates. I can't tell if it's a mistake or if someone wanted it buried there so nobody would notice. Harry closed his eyes. It wasn't a mistake. Not after the visions, the voices, the ship that wasn't a ship. Scott's voice sharpened. Got it. Dad, the code isn't random. It's a star catalog entry. Constellation Aquarius, right ascension, declination, exact position in the sky. Harry's breath caught. Aquarius. The water bearer. The vessel. He sank into the chair, heart pounding. You are the vessel. Scott kept talking, words quick now. But that's not the strange part. The file I pulled, it's classified under an old Canadian government program. Cultural preservation. Yeah, but with a subtag. Project Anunnaki. The word hit Harry like a blow. He pressed the phone tighter to his ear, but for a moment he wasn't listening to Scott at all. The hum had returned, low and certain, threading through his bones. We are not finished. Scott's voice cut back through the haze. Dad, did you hear me? There's a government file literally named Anunnaki tied to your adoption record. What the hell is going on? Harry forced air into his lungs. I don't know, he whispered. But maybe I was never supposed to. There was a long pause. Then Harry said quietly, Scott, I can't carry this alone. Kayla needs to know. Scott exhaled. She already suspects something's going on. You might as well give her the truth. Harry hesitated. Truth was a slippery thing in his world. Half memories, sealed records, voices that claimed to be older than time. But Kayla had always been his anchor, the one who saw past his brokenness. He pressed her name on the screen. She answered quickly, her voice still warm despite the hour. Dad? You okay? Harry swallowed. Kayla, I need you to listen. I'm with Scott. We've found something. About me. About before. She didn't speak at first. When she did, her voice carried both fear and resolve. About your adoption? Yes, Harry said. He glanced at the pouch in his pocket, the pendant pulsing faintly as if eager to be part of the conversation. Scott found files, erased files. My adoption record is tied to something called Project Anunnaki, and there are coordinates. In Aquarius. Silence. Dad, that's insane. It is, Harry admitted, but it's real. I've seen things, Kayla, things I can't explain, and I think it's connected to who I really am. Scott cut in, his voice steady and practical. Kayla, I've got the digital proof. Records altered, cross-references to astronomy codes. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's data. Someone hid him in the system. Kayla exhaled sharply. So what do we do? What does this mean? Harry leaned forward, elbows on the table, feeling the hum of the pendant against his chest. It means my past isn't just missing. It was taken. And whatever, is behind it. They're not done with me. The line went quiet. For a moment, Harry thought the hum had returned. Then Kayla spoke, her voice firm in a way that reminded him she was stronger than she looked. Then we find out the truth. Together. The morning air was sharp with the scent of cut grass and dew when Harry heard a knock at the door. He shuffled to open it and found Kayla standing there, hair pulled back in a loose knot, a jacket thrown over her pajamas. She gave him a quick smile, the kind that tried to mask worry. You didn't sleep, she said, stepping past him into the kitchen without waiting for an answer. Harry chuckled softly. Neither did you, looks like. She ignored that, moving to the coffee pot like she had 100 times before. Growing up next door, she had spent more mornings here than in her own house. The sound of her voice in his kitchen still reminded him of the days when his parents were alive, when she'd run barefoot between the two homes like both belonged to her. Kayla poured herself a mug and leaned against the counter, studying him. Scott told me what he found. About the files. About Project Anunnaki. Harry rubbed his face. Yeah. It's a lot. She took a breath, steadying herself. Dad, I think there's something I need to tell you. Something Grandpa told me. Harry looked up sharply. When? A few months before he died, Kayla said softly. We were in the backyard. He was quieter than usual, like he was carrying something heavy. He told me that one day, after he and Grandma were gone, I should tell you something he couldn't say himself. Harry's stomach tightened. What was it? Kayla stared into her mug, fingers tight around the ceramic. He said, tell your father he came from the stars, and that it was no accident. Harry blinked, heart hammering. The stars? Kayla nodded. I thought he was joking, or that the painkillers were messing with his head, but he grabbed my hand, hard. He looked me right in the eyes, and I've never seen him so serious. He told me not to forget. He made me promise. Harry sank into the chair at the table. His pulse roared in his ears, the pendant in his pocket warming as if it had been listening all along. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked, though his voice was gentle. Kayla's eyes glistened. Because I didn't want to hurt you. You'd already lost them, and you'd spent so long not asking questions about your past. I thought maybe he just wanted me to give you comfort, something poetic. I didn't think it meant anything. It means everything, Harry whispered. Kayla came to the table and sat across from him. Dad, what if he knew something? What if Grandma and Grandpa both knew, but they were too afraid to tell you? Harry remembered the pained looks, the silence, the way they'd told him to wait until we're gone. His throat tightened. They knew, he said. God help me. They knew. Kayla reached across the table, taking his hand. Then we find out. Not just for you, for them too. Before Harry could answer, his phone buzzed again. A new message from Scott. Attached were documents. Scanned images, pixelated but readable. One was stamped with the word confidential in bold letters. Another showed the same astronomical coordinates Scott had mentioned, written alongside a phrase that chilled Harry to the bone. Subject vessel. Lineage unknown. Cultural placement. Controlled. Harry's breath came short. He showed the screen to Kayla. She read it, her jaw tightening. They knew what you were, she said, and they tried to bury it. Harry closed his eyes. The pendant pulsed once, twice, in rhythm with his heart. We are not finished. Chapter 7. Harry sat at the table with Kayla when the phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't another document. It was a call from Scott. His voice was lower, urgent. Dad, Kayla. Listen, since I started digging into those files, someone's noticed. I've had 3 flagged login attempts on systems I normally ghost through. That doesn't happen by accident. It's ceases. Harry frowned. Ceases? Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Scott said flatly. Think of them like the Canadian FBI, and they don't poke around unless someone higher up told them to. Kayla's hand tightened on Harry's. Are you saying they're watching you? I'm saying they're already watching, Scott answered. And if they've connected me to you, we're all compromised. Harry leaned back, heart pounding. The kitchen felt smaller, the air thinner. What do we do? Scott hesitated only a moment before answering. We go dark. I've still got one of the old laptops, an untraceable machine I built with a hacker friend back in college. It runs off-grid, no IDs, no pings. I'll bring it. Harry swallowed hard. And where do we meet? Scott's voice steadied. It's old hunting cabin, the one in the woods north of Algonquin. Nobody knows it's there, and even if they did, it's off every digital map. We'll be safe. Safer than here. Kayla's eyes widened. Scott, you really think our lives are in danger? I know they are, Scott said grimly. People don't erase adoption files, stamp Project Anunnaki on them, and tie them to star coordinates without expecting someone to keep it buried. If Ceases is sniffing, it's not just curiosity, it's containment. And we're the variables. Harry's pulse thudded in his ears. He had always thought his life would fade into quiet routines, that danger was for younger men, for soldiers or criminals, not a tired father with a broken past. Yet here it was, his family caught in a web woven decades before he knew to look. How soon? He asked. Tonight, Scott said. Pack light, only what you need. No phones once we're on the road. They'll track them. Kayla's grip on Harry's hand tightened. Dad, if they're watching us. Then we move fast, Harry said, surprising himself with the steel in his voice. He met her eyes. We've waited long enough. After they hung up, silence hung heavy in the kitchen. Kayla broke it first. Grandpa always said the cabin was a place of refuge. Maybe he meant for this. Harry nodded slowly. He thought of his father teaching him how to fire a rifle under the tall pines, of evenings spent skinning fish by the fire, of his mother's laughter echoing from the porch. The cabin wasn't just a building. It was memory, protection, blood. But now it was going to be something else. A battleground, a sanctuary, a place where the truth could no longer hide. Harry rose, pulling the pendant pouch from his pocket and holding it in his palm. All right, he said quietly. If they want a vessel, let's see if they're ready to find out what's inside. By dusk, the three of them were on the road. Harry drove his old truck, the bench seat creaking beneath him as Kayla sat close, arms folded, watching the darkening sky. Scott followed in his own car, the hacker's laptop sealed in a battered case on the passenger seat. They had agreed to leave their phones behind. The silence of the cab felt heavier without the usual buzz of notifications, like a line had been cut between them and the rest of the world. The highway stretched north, miles of asphalt cutting through the endless Canadian forest. Pines crowded the shoulders, their tops swaying against a bruised sky. The deeper they went, the fewer signs of life they passed. No gas stations, no houses, not even the distant glow of towns. Only trees, shadows, and the occasional shape of a deer startled by headlights. Kayla shifted. Dad, do you really think we'll be safe out there? Harry tightened his grip on the wheel. Safe? I don't know, but it's where your grandparents always felt at peace. If there's anywhere left that's ours, it's the cabin. She nodded, staring out into the trees. It already feels like we're leaving the world behind. Harry understood. The farther they drove, the more the ordinary fell away. The hum of cities, the weight of routine. Here, under the canopy of dark fir and whispering birch, the air felt charged, not unlike the nights when the spheres had come for him. A pair of headlights flashed in the rear view. Scott's car stayed close, his steady presence a reminder that they weren't alone in this. As the sun dipped, stars bled into the sky, faint at first, then brilliant. Harry found his eyes drawn to one patch in particular, the glittering streams of Aquarius. His pulse quickened. The coordinates, the vessel. The hum rose faintly in his chest, not overwhelming, but present. Watching. Waiting. Kayla must have felt it too. She turned from the window, studying him. You hear it, don't you? Harry nodded slowly. Yeah. Neither spoke again for a long time. By the time they turned off the highway, the road had narrowed into gravel, headlights bouncing off trunks that loomed closer and closer. The forest seemed to fold around them, branches arching like ribs overhead. Scott's car slowed behind them, tires crunching. Harry eased the truck forward, heart beating faster with every turn of the winding trail. He could almost smell the cabin already. Pine, smoke, dust, and the faint ghost of his parents' lives. At last, the trees thinned, and the clearing opened before them. The cabin sat where it always had, weathered timbers leaning slightly but still sturdy, its chimney a dark line against the night sky. The lake stretched beyond it, a black mirror reflecting the first stars of evening. Harry pulled the truck to a stop, killed the engine, and let silence swallow them. Scott parked beside them, stepping out with the case slung over his shoulder. The three of them stood together at the edge of the clearing, listening to the stillness of the wilderness. The night was too quiet. No crickets, no loons on the lake, only the wind moving through the trees, whispering in a language none of them understood. Kayla shivered. It feels like they're already here. Harry looked at the cabin, then at the stars above Aquarius burning brighter than the rest. The pendant pressed against his chest, hot as a coal. They are, he said. Chapter 9. The cabin smelled the same as Harry remembered. Pine boards, cold stone from the hearth, the faint ghost of tobacco his father had smoked on the porch decades ago. Dust lay thick on the shelves, but the place was intact, preserved by silence and isolation. Scott moved quickly, pulling the battered case onto the scarred wooden table and setting up the old hacker's laptop. Its casing was covered in stickers, long faded, corners worn smooth. He plugged in a portable power pack, wires trailing like roots, and the machine hummed to life with a low, unfamiliar chime. This thing doesn't exist, Scott said, tapping in commands with muscle memory. No IP, no trace. Everything runs through ghost nodes. If Ceases tries to follow us in, they'll be chasing smoke. Kayla stood behind him, arms folded. That's comforting, in a terrifying way. Harry moved to the gun rack in the corner, running his hand along the old rifles. His father's 30-30 lever action still gleamed faintly under a coat of oil, the stock scarred from years of use. He took it down, grabbed a box of shells, and checked the chamber with a practiced click. What are you doing? Kayla asked, brow furrowing. Harry forced a small grin. I'll go get us some food. We might be here for a while. He tapped the rifle lightly. Haven't had fresh venison in years. Scott didn't look up from the laptop. Dad, that rifle's more for peace of mind than hunting. You sure you're not just looking for an excuse to be out there? Harry's grin faltered for just a second. I'll be fine. Just keep digging. We need answers more than we need me hovering. Kayla watched him longer than was comfortable, suspicion in her eyes. But she said nothing. Harry slung the rifle over his shoulder, slipped the shells into his jacket pocket, and stepped outside. The night air hit him cold, smelling of pine and lake water. He walked down the steps slowly, listening for movement in the trees. The truth was, food was the last thing on his mind. He didn't want his kids in the line of fire. Not if the lights came back. Not if the shadows from his visions decided to step into the waking world. If something happened out here, better it happened to him alone. Better me than them, he whispered, and disappeared into the trees. Inside the cabin, the only light came from the laptop's faint glow. Scott's fingers danced across the keys, the old system coughing up fragments of files that looked like they had been buried for decades. Strings of code, half-redacted reports, odd numerical entries. Kayla leaned closer. What are we looking at? Metadata, Scott muttered. Buried deeper than I expected. They didn't just alter your dad's file, they stacked it with placeholders. And some of these, they're not even human-readable formats, almost like they're waiting for the right key to unlock them. Kayla frowned. So unlock them. He gave her a tight smile. Working on it. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the soft hum of the laptop's fan. Then something flickered on the screen. An image file buried in a directory labeled Preservation. Scott clicked it open. The picture was grainy, black and white, like it had been photocopied too many times. It showed a group of men in suits standing in front of what looked like a hospital ward. In the center, a nurse held a bundled infant. On the margin of the page, scrawled in faded pen, were 3 words, Subject Vessel Number 1. Kayla's hand flew to her mouth. That's... Dad, Scott finished grimly. It has to be. Kayla shook her head, eyes wide. But look at the shadows. Scott leaned closer. Behind the group, half obscured by glare, stood figures that didn't belong. Too tall, too thin. Limbs slightly wrong, eyes glinting white even through the distortion. Watching. The laptop screen flickered, static crawling across the image. For a moment, the figures seemed to move, leaning closer to the lens. That's not possible, Scott whispered. Kayla pulled back, trembling. It's them. It has to be them. Scott slammed the laptop shut. The cabin plunged into darkness. They sat frozen, listening to the creak of the timbers, the wind against the eaves, their own hearts hammering. Then, from deep in the forest, sharp and unmistakable, a gunshot. Chapter 10. The cabin was dark except for the faint glow of embers in the stone hearth. Kayla sat at the table, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the closed laptop. Scott paced near the window, running a hand through his hair again and again, eyes darting toward the black wall of trees. The gunshot still echoed in their heads. We should go after him, Kayla whispered. Scott stopped, shook his head. No, that's exactly what we shouldn't do. If it wasn't a deer, if it was... He broke off, swallowing hard. We can't risk splitting up. Kayla looked at him, eyes glistening. So what? We just sit here? Pretend we didn't hear it? Scott's jaw tightened. We wait until we know more. Dad's tough. He wouldn't go down easy. The silence pressed in, broken only by the creak of the timbers and the restless whisper of branches outside. Time crawled. Somewhere beyond the lake, a loon gave its mournful cry, the first sign of life since they'd arrived. Then, slowly, the black sky began to pale. The trees outlined themselves in soft strokes of gray as the earliest strikes of dawn slipped across the horizon. The air inside the cabin seemed to ease just slightly, as though daylight had pushed back some of the weight of the night. Scott stopped pacing. He walked to the gun rack, hesitated, then lifted down a pump-action shotgun. He checked the chamber, slid in 2 shells, and racked it with a heavy clack. The sound seemed to anchor him, to remind him that he wasn't helpless. Kayla flinched. Scott? Just in case, he muttered. Before she could argue, the cabin door banged open. Harry stood in the threshold, rifle slung over his shoulder, a smear of blood on his sleeve. For a heartbeat, Kayla's heart stopped, until she saw what dangled from his other hand. The hind legs of a deer, heavy and limp, its antlers scraping the doorframe as he hauled it inside. Can anyone come out and help me hang this deer for butchering? He asked, voice steady, almost casual. Kayla let out a shaky laugh, part relief, part disbelief. Dad, you nearly scared us to death. Scott lowered the shotgun, shoulders tight with both tension and release. You should have said something sooner, old man. We thought. Harry dropped the deer onto the floor with a heavy thud. I know what you thought, he said. His eyes met Scott's, then Kayla's. There was no grin now, no mask, only wariness, and something else, flickering behind his gaze. Kayla noticed it first. She froze, staring at her father's sleeve. Not the blood from the deer, something darker seeping slowly beneath the cuff of his jacket. Dad, she whispered. You're bleeding. Harry looked down as if seeing it for the first time. His jaw clenched. It's nothing. But the way he swayed on his feet told him it was something. Scott stepped forward. What happened out there? Harry opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the hum returned. Low, thrumming, not from the walls, not from the earth, but from inside the cabin itself. The windows rattled in their frames, the deer's antlers vibrating against the floorboards. Kayla clutched the table, eyes wide. Scott raised the shotgun again, but it was useless against what they both felt pressing in from every direction. Harry staggered, the pendant in his pocket pulsing like a heartbeat. He lifted his head, eyes wild. They found us. What happened to Harry in the woods? Harry had moved deeper into the pines, the rifle cradled against his arm, every step crunching softly in the frost. The forest was alive in ways he hadn't felt since boyhood. Branches groaning overhead, owls shifting unseen, the faint ripple of the lake behind him. But beneath it all, he felt them. The same unseen watchers from his visions. At first, it was only a prickle along his spine, a hum in his bones. Then the air shifted, and the trees seemed to lean inward, as though listening. He paused at a clearing, the moonlight spilling like silver across the ground. That's when he saw the deer. A young buck, frozen mid-step, eyes wide, not with fear of him, but with something else. It trembled as though sensing the same presence pressing down on Harry. Harry raised the rifle, not to shoot, not yet, but because the buck wasn't alone. Behind it, the air shimmered. Shapes flickered between the trees, tall and thin, the same elongated shadows he had seen on the phantom ship. Their eyes glowed faintly, catching the moonlight where no eyes should have been. Harry's pulse raced. He lowered the rifle toward them, finger tight on the trigger. "Stay back," he hissed. His voice sounded too small against the silence. The figures didn't advance. They simply watched. Then one extended a hand, long, pale, tipped with too many joints. The buck jolted, bolted forward, and Harry fired, more out of instinct than choice. The shot cracked through the forest, echoing back on itself. The deer collapsed in the clearing, a life snuffed in an instant. But the figures didn't move. They didn't flinch. They only tilted their heads, studying Harry with the stillness of stone statues. And then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they were gone. The clearing was empty but for the buck, steam rising faintly from its body. Harry stood frozen, rifle still raised, heart slamming against his ribs. He barely noticed the warmth spreading down his sleeve until he looked and saw the blood. A thin cut traced across his forearm, clean, deliberate, as if a blade of light had passed through him. He hadn't felt the wound when it happened. He still didn't know how it had been made. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to kneel beside the deer. His hands shook as he gripped its legs, dragging it back toward the cabin. It was better this way. Let Scott and Kayla think it had just been a hunt. No need to tell them the truth. Not yet. Because the truth was worse than anything he could admit. The truth was, they had let him live. Chapter 11. The cabin shook with the low hum, the walls vibrating as if an invisible storm pressed against them. Kayla gripped the table, Scott raised the shotgun, and Harry staggered, blood still seeping through his sleeve. His voice came out ragged, heavy with dread. "They found us." The words hung in the air, but Harry's mind was already sliding back, to the forest, to the moments he hadn't told them about. He had left the cabin with the rifle, telling himself it was for food. But the truth was simpler, crueler. He didn't want to risk their lives if the lights returned. Better it be him alone in the woods than all three of them trapped under the same gaze. The forest had been still, eerily so. Even the usual rustle of night creatures seemed absent. He had walked deeper until the pines opened to a clearing bathed in silver moonlight. That's when he saw it. The young buck, frozen mid-step, muscles trembling. Its eyes weren't on him, but on something behind him. Harry turned. The shapes were there, tall, thin, their edges shimmering, as though the air itself resisted holding them. Eyes like cold fire watched him from the shadows. His pulse raced. He raised the rifle. "Stay back," he whispered, though his voice cracked in the quiet. The figures didn't advance. One raised a hand, long and jointed, pointing not at him, but at the deer. The buck bolted. The gun went off in Harry's hands before he thought, the crack tearing the silence. The animal collapsed in the clearing, still at last. Harry's breath came in gasps. The figures didn't move. They only tilted their heads, studying him, silent, patient. Then a line of heat seared his forearm. He jerked, looking down to see blood welling through his jacket. The wound was too clean, too perfect to be from a branch or stumble. He hadn't even felt the cut until he saw it. And when he looked up again, the clearing was empty. Only the deer remained, steam rising from its body. Harry knew then they had chosen not to take him. They had marked him instead. He dragged the deer back toward the cabin, every step heavier than the last. Better to let his children believe it was only a hunt. Better to carry the silence than admit the truth, that he was being spared. For now. The flash of memory snapped away. He was back in the cabin, Kayla's wide eyes on him, Scott gripping the shotgun tight. The hum deepened, rattling the window panes. Harry straightened slowly, blood dripping down his arm. His voice was low, certain. "It doesn't matter where we hide. They're already inside." Chapter 11. The hum deepened until it became a physical force, pressing against the cabin walls. Dust sifted down from the rafters, the deer's antlers rattling against the floorboards, in time with the invisible rhythm. Kayla clutched Harry's arm, eyes wide. "Dad! What do we do?" Scott raised the shotgun, sweeping the room. "Stay away from the windows. If they're out there, I don't want us silhouetted." Harry's jaw tightened. He could feel the pendant burning in his pocket, pulsing with the same beat as the hum. It wasn't just responding to the presence. It was feeding it. The lamp on the counter flickered once, then twice, before dying completely. The laptop screen glowed alone in the dark, its fan whining higher, like the machine itself was afraid. Scott cursed under his breath. They're in the system. I can feel it. The laptop's being probed from the outside, but it's not Cease's. This is different. Kayla's gaze darted between them, panic rising. Different how? The screen answered before Scott could. Lines of text scrolled upward, not in English, not in any alphabet Kayla had ever seen. Angular symbols, spirals, dots like constellations. The words appeared too fast to type, yet they had rhythm, almost like chanting. Kayla pressed a hand to her mouth. It's them. Harry felt his knees weaken. The same spiral as the pendant, the same pulse as the hum. They were speaking through the machine. The air temperature dropped, their breath fogged in front of them. From outside came the crunch of footsteps in the snow-dusted ground, but when Scott aimed the shotgun at the door, the steps shifted to the ceiling. Then the walls, then the floor. All around them. The pendant seared hot against Harry's chest. He staggered, fumbling to pull it out of his pocket, the cloth pouch smoking faintly where the spiral pressed through. "Get it away from me!" he shouted, slamming it onto the table. The moment it hit the wood, the laptop screen flared white. The scrolling stopped. For one long second, the room was silent. Then a single phrase appeared on the screen in plain English, stark against the brightness. Subject vessel activated. The deer's body on the floor convulsed, legs jerking as if electricity had run through it. Kayla screamed. Scott raised the shotgun, and Harry whispered, horrified, "It's not them. It's me." Chapter 12. The deer's body spasmed again, harder this time, its antlers clattering against the floorboards with a violent crack. Kayla backed into the corner, hands over her mouth, eyes wide with terror. "Scott!" she cried. Scott didn't hesitate. He leveled the shotgun and fired. The blast deafened the room, wood chips raining from the wall where buckshot tore through, but the deer kept thrashing. Its eyes rolled open, glowing faintly with the same pale light Harry had seen in the spheres. Harry staggered back, clutching the table. The pendant still pulsed, hot as iron. Every surge from it seemed to echo through the animal, as though it was feeding energy into the carcass. "It's not the deer!" Harry shouted over the ringing in their ears. "It's me! They're using me!" The laptop screen flared white again. New words scrolled across in block letters. Vessel test. Initiated. The cabin shuddered. Dishes rattled off shelves. The deer lurched upright on stiff legs, its body jerking like a puppet with tangled strings. Kayla screamed again, pressing against the wall. Scott fired a second shot, this time point blank. The buck's chest exploded in gore, but the thing stayed on its feet, wobbling, glowing brighter with every pulse. Harry fell to his knees, clutching his head as voices crowded his skull. Not one voice, not two. Hundreds, layered and inhuman, vibrating his teeth. "We are here. We are within." The vessel accepts. His vision blurred. The cabin around him seemed to melt, walls stretching tall as the ship from his vision. The floor pitched like a deck at sea. He smelled salt air, old wood, and something metallic, like blood and ozone. Kayla's voice pierced through. "Dad! Fight it!" He tried to rise, but his arms didn't obey. His fingers trembled, then splayed wide, moving on their own. The pendant flared so bright it seared the table beneath it, burning a spiral into the wood. The deer lunged. Scott shoved Kayla aside, swinging the butt of the shotgun, cracking an antler, but the thing didn't slow, its glowing eyes locked on Harry. Harry's throat tightened. He could feel his pulse sinking with the thing's movements, as if they were one body split into two shells. Each jerk of the deer tugged at his muscles. Each gasp of its ruined lungs echoed in his chest. "They're inside me," he rasped. "If I don't stop it, they'll come through." Scott grabbed his arm, shaking him. "Then how do we stop it?" Harry looked up, eyes bloodshot, the glow of the pendant reflecting in his pupils. "You can't." The deer shrieked, a sound not of any animal born on Earth, and hurled itself at the table. The laptop toppled, sparks spitting from its ports as alien script filled the screen again, scrolling faster and faster until the words blurred into white. The cabin groaned as if crushed by invisible hands. Kayla fell to her knees, covering her head. Scott racked the shotgun, but his eyes betrayed the truth. There weren't enough shells in the world to stop what was happening. And then, everything stopped. The deer collapsed in a heap, smoking. The laptop screen went black. The hum vanished. The silence that followed was absolute. Kayla looked up, trembling. Scott lowered the shotgun, sweat dripping down his face. Harry stood slowly, swaying. His sleeve was soaked with blood, his eyes hollow, but the pendant glowed faintly against his chest, no longer hot, no longer burning. He lifted it between two fingers, staring at it. His voice was low, almost reverent. "That wasn't an attack," he said. Kayla's voice shook. "What was it then?" Harry closed his fist around the pendant. "It was a test." Chapter 13. The silence after the chaos was suffocating. Smoke curled from the ruined deer carcass, acrid and bitter. The table still bore the black spiral burned into its wood. Scott set the shotgun down slowly, as though afraid another sound might set everything off again. Kayla moved to Harry, pressing a towel against his bleeding arm. "Dad, you need stitches." He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the pendant, the faint glow fading now to nothing, as though it had gone back to sleep. Then, headlights cut through the window. All three froze. Scott's voice was a hoarse whisper. "That's not supposed to be possible. Nobody knows this place." Engines idled outside. Doors slammed. Voices barked short orders, clipped, professional. The crunch of boots on gravel followed. Harry's gut twisted. He knew that cadence. He had heard it once when border agents raided a tattoo parlor he'd worked at, hunting for drugs hidden in ink bottles. This was the same rhythm of control, of authority. Ceases. Scott lunged for the laptop, shoving it back in its case. "They traced me. God damn it. They traced me." Kayla's eyes darted to the shotgun on the table. "Scott, no," Harry snapped. "We're not shooting cops. Not unless we have no choice." The knock came hard, 3 raps that shook the door. A voice followed, muffled but commanding. "Mr. Buxton, Canadian Security Intelligence, we need to speak with you. Open the door." Harry's pulse hammered. They had survived the night, the voices, the test, and now this. His children looking to him, waiting. The knock came again, louder this time. "Mr. Buxton, open the door now or we will come in." Harry stood slowly, his hand tightening around the pendant in his fist. He could feel it warming again, just faintly. He looked at Scott, at Kayla, at the broken deer on the floor, then at the door, where shadows moved against the thin crack of dawn light, and "They're not here to help us," Harry whispered. "They're here to make sure the truth never leaves this cabin." Chapter 14. The third knock didn't come. Instead, the door burst inward with a thunderous crack, the frame splintering as boots and rifles poured into the cabin. Shadows of armored men cut across the morning light, black uniforms marked with the insignia of CISs. "On the ground! Now!" one barked, voice sharp through a tactical mask. Red laser dots swept across the room. Kayla screamed and stumbled back against the wall. Scott shoved the laptop case under the table and threw his hands up. Harry stood where he was, chest heaving, the pendant still hot in his grip. "Down!" the agent snapped again. 2 men surged forward, grabbing Harry by the arms, forcing him to his knees. Pain shot through his cut forearm, fresh blood soaking the towel Kayla had tied there. Scott started forward. "He's injured, damn it! He needs a doctor." A rifle butt slammed into his shoulder, driving him back. "Quiet!" Kayla dropped to her knees beside her father, tears streaking her face. "Please! Stop! He's done nothing." The lead agent stepped into the center of the cabin. He moved with slow, deliberate control, scanning the room, his visor reflecting the burned spiral in the table, the smoking deer carcass. His head tilted slightly as though cataloging everything. Finally, he crouched in front of Harry. His voice was calm now, too calm. "Harry Buxton, you are under directive investigation under Project Anunnaki." Harry's breath caught. The words struck like a hammer. He tried to speak, but the agent cut him off with a single gesture. "You will come with us, quietly. Your children will be processed." Kayla stiffened. "Processed? What does that mean?" The agent didn't answer. He only reached for the pouch still clutched in Harry's fist. The moment his gloved hand touched the pendant, the hum surged back, louder than ever. The cabin lights flared, every bulb bursting in a shower of sparks. The deer carcass twitched violently, limbs jerking as though strings pulled at it again. Agents shouted. Rifles swung toward the movement. One opened fire, bullets tearing through the already ruined flesh. The deer lurched upright. Kayla screamed. Scott dove for the shotgun. Harry gasped as the pendant burned in his hand. A single phrase searing into his skull. The vessel is chosen. Chapter 15. The cabin erupted in chaos. The deer's body convulsed, rising fully on broken legs, glowing veins spiderwebbing under its torn hide. Its head snapped back with an inhuman shriek that rattled the rafters. "Open fire!" the lead agent barked. Muzzle flashes lit the room in staccato bursts. Bullets tore through flesh and antler, splintering bone and spraying gore across the log walls. But the creature didn't fall. Each round only seemed to charge it further, its glow intensifying until the whole cabin pulsed with white light. Harry writhed against the men holding him, the pendant searing his palm. His vision split. One moment the cabin filled with gunfire, the next a deck of an ancient ship rolling under him, shadows marching across it. He felt the voices pushing through, each shot syncing with his heartbeat. The vessel is chosen. Scott dove behind the table, yanking Kayla with him, as splinters flew. He grabbed the shotgun, racked it, and shouted over the roar of automatic fire. "Dad, tell me how to stop this!" Harry's throat tore with the answer. "You can't! It's tied to me!" One agent was lifted off his feet as the deer swung its rack of shattered antlers like a hammer, flinging him into the stone hearth. Another screamed as a glowing tendril erupted from the carcass, latching onto his chest. His scream cut off instantly as his body went limp, eyes burning with the same pale fire. Kayla pressed her hands over her ears, tears streaming. "Scott, we have to get out!" Scott fired the shotgun, the blast shoving the thing back half a step, but its body only knit itself together, the holes glowing brighter instead of bleeding. Harry felt the agent's left grips weaken as they turned their weapons on the creature. He lurched free, collapsing to his knees. The pendant spiral burned into his hand, the metal almost molten. "Command them," the voices hissed. "You are the vessel. They obey you." Harry squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head. "No, I won't." The deer lunged again, bowling through two agents. Their rifles clattered across the floor. Scott rolled to shield Kayla as debris rained down from the shaking ceiling. Harry staggered upright, clutching the pendant in both hands. The voices screamed inside him, 100 tongues speaking as one. He felt his lips move without his will. "Stop!" The word blasted through the cabin like thunder. Every agent froze mid-motion. The deer's body locked in place, its glow stuttering. Even Scott and Kayla looked at him, eyes wide, their bodies rigid as though some invisible command had gripped them too. Harry's chest heaved. The voices whispered again, softer now, coaxing. "Yes, you see now. Through you, we are Legion." The deer twitched, straining against the invisible hold. Its jaws opened in a voiceless scream. The glow built again, brighter, angrier. Harry clenched the pendant tighter, veins bulging in his arms. "If you want me," he growled, "you leave them out of it." The cabin walls cracked. Light poured through the seams like a sun trying to break in. The agents screamed, their frozen forms trembling as if pulled in two directions. Kayla's voice broke through the roar. "Dad, don't let them take you." Harry's vision blurred white. The pendant split his palm, blood hissing as it dripped onto the floor. The spiral burned brighter, expanding outward like fire across the wood. The last thing he heard was the chorus of voices rising like a tide. The vessel has chosen. Chapter 16. Kayla woke to silence. Not the silence of a calm forest, but the silence after thunder, a ringing emptiness that pressed on her ears. Her cheek rested against the rough cabin floor. She pushed herself up slowly, vision swimming. The air smelled of smoke and ozone, sharp as if lightning had struck inside the room. The cabin was changed. The walls were cracked, splintered with glowing seams where wood should have been solid. Strange spiral patterns burned into the floorboards, spread outward from the table in perfect circles, each line etched deep as though carved by fire. The deer's body was gone. So were the agents, nothing left of them but their rifles scattered like toys, some still smoking. "Scott," she whispered hoarsely. He groaned nearby, pushing himself upright. His shirt was scorched across one sleeve, his face pale and streaked with soot. He blinked at the room, eyes wide. What the hell happened?" Kayla shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. "I don't know, but—" She stopped, her gaze fixed on the far side of the cabin. Harry stood there. He wasn't bleeding anymore. The wound on his arm was gone, not even a scar left behind. His posture was straighter, stronger, as if years of weight had been lifted from him. His eyes glowed faintly, a pale shimmer that wasn't reflection or trick of light. Scott staggered to his feet, shotgun clutched loosely in his hand. "Dad?" Harry turned to them slowly. His face was calm, almost serene, but the stillness in it felt wrong. Too controlled. Too empty. "It's all right," he said, voice steady. "They were only testing me. The worst is past." Kayla's throat tightened. "Dad, your eyes," he smiled faintly. "I see more clearly now." Scott exchanged a glance with Kayla. He gripped the shotgun tighter. "What did they do to you?" Harry stepped closer, his boots leaving faint glowing footprints in the spirals burned into the floor. The pendant hung loose around his neck now, pulsing faintly with each beat of his heart. "They didn't do anything," Harry said softly. "They revealed what I've always been." Kayla backed up a step, shaking her head. "Dad, you sound like them." Harry stopped. For a long moment, silence filled the ruined cabin. Then, very gently, he said, "Because I am them." Chapter 17. Harry stood in the center of the ruined cabin, smoke curling up from the spiral burned into the floor. He could feel Kayla's eyes on him, Scott's shotgun aimed loosely in his direction, but their voices were distant now, like echoes underwater. What he heard instead were them. Whispers, layered upon whispers, each threading into the next. Not words exactly, but impressions, currents of thought that slid into his mind as though they had always belonged there. He didn't fight them. Not at first. He couldn't. His arm no longer ached. The cut that had bled down his sleeve was gone, the skin smooth and whole. He flexed his fingers, marveling at their strength. His breath was steady, calm, as if fear had been wrung from him entirely. For a fleeting moment, it felt good. Better than good, it felt right. "We have awakened what was dormant," the voices murmured. "The vessel must align. The vessel must accept." Harry swallowed hard, staring at his hands. His father's hands used to tremble in old age, knuckles swollen and stiff. His own hands had always carried the same weakness, nerves that betrayed him, fingers that slipped on keys or tattoo needles. But now they were steady, steadier than they'd ever been. He closed his eyes. Behind the darkness, he saw stars, not the scattered lights of a night sky, but ordered, structured, like beads on a string. He knew where Aquarius was, not from books or charts, but from memory written into his blood. Kayla's voice cut faintly into the vision. "Dad, please, come back to us." For a moment, he wanted to. God, he wanted to. But the voices pressed harder. "You are not theirs. You were never theirs. We claimed you at birth. We marked you in silence. Now you must walk the path." Harry opened his eyes. His reflection shimmered faintly in the cabin's cracked window. His pupils glowed, faint but undeniable. He barely recognized the man looking back. He realized then that he was changing, not just touched by them, but becoming something in between. And the worst part wasn't the fear. It was how natural it felt. Chapter 18. Harry stood in the ruins of the cabin, the spiral still glowing faintly under his feet. Kayla and Scott staring at him as though he were both father and stranger. He could feel the change in every cell of his body. No more pain, no more weakness. The old weight of being called lazy, broken, or not enough had lifted. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. He looked at his children, his voice steady, almost tender. "I know what you see. I know what you fear. But listen to me. I'm not afraid anymore. For once, I'm not lost. I've found where I belong." Kayla shook her head, tears streaming. "Dad, you're not leaving us, are you?" Harry stepped closer, placing a hand on her cheek. His skin was warm, solid, though light seemed to shimmer faintly beneath it. "I'll never really leave you. I'll remember you longer than you can even imagine, longer than time will allow." He turned to Scott, who gripped the shotgun loosely, eyes wet but hard. "You were always the problem solver," Harry said. "I never told you enough. I'm proud of you. I always was." Scott's throat tightened. "Dad, what happens now?" Harry smiled softly. "Now, I rest." He laid his hand gently on the laptop still sitting on the table. The screen flickered once, then numbers began to stream across it. Account transfers, balances soaring. More money than any of them would ever need. Enough to keep them safe, secure, free of struggle. Kayla gasped. "Dad, how?" "Knowledge," Harry said simply. "All the knowledge of the universe is at my fingertips. And I'm giving you what I can because you gave me everything. You gave me love. You gave me reason." The pendant glowed bright against his chest, its spiral spinning with impossible depth. His body shimmered now, edges thinning as though light was unraveling him. Harry's eyes softened. "Don't cry. I'm happy. Truly happy. No old age, no pain, no death, just peace. Finally, peace." Kayla clung to him, sobbing. I don't want you to go. He kissed her forehead gently. You'll see me in every star, kiddo, and I'll be watching always. Scott stepped forward, his voice breaking. We're proud of you, Dad. Harry's eyes glistened. A single tear slid down his cheek as his body grew transparent, fading into shimmering light. The cabin filled with warmth, a hum softer than a lullaby. Goodbye, my loves, he whispered. I'm going home. And then he was gone. Nothing left but the faint glow of spirals carved into the floor and the silence of the forest beyond. Kayla collapsed into Scott's arms, both weeping, both smiling through the ache in their chests. Relief washed over them, a strange pride blooming in the grief. Their father had found what he'd searched for all his life. Acceptance, belonging, peace. But somewhere, deep in the back of their minds, in a room neither of them would ever willingly enter, the thought lingered. If the Anunnaki had come for him, would they one day come for us too?